For years, it was not uncommon for people to drift away from the church in their early 20s. Living on their own for the first time and living a little wild got the best of them, but it was temporary. When they wanted to settle down, when they needed a foundation to build their life on, more times than not, they returned to the faith of their youth, leading some in our church today to look at our current crisis and repeat that old line, "Don't worry, they'll come back. There's nothing to worry about, this is the way things go." I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is simply not the case anymore. They're not coming back, and the sooner that we can accept this, the sooner we can do something about it. Today, more than a third of Gen Zers identify as religiously unaffiliated, by far more than any other generation. More than a momentary lapse in church attendance during their early adult years, this is simply the norm for their lives. Only 40% reported attending church service as a kid, and only 42 of them attended religious education. For this generation, they're not coming back because they were never here to begin with. Unlike previous generations that could fall back on their childhood faith when they need a strong foundation, there's nothing to fall back on for most youth today, meaning that young people are not going to show up at our door. They're never going to have a reversion and one day get involved. They're not out there just waiting for our church to get our act together, and as soon as we have good programs, they'll come flooding in. They're going to get married outside the church, have kids, not introduce them to the faith of Christ, and not think twice about it. They don't even know what they're missing, which means, and I know this is abundantly obvious, waiting for them to show up is not going to work. Doing what we're doing, even improving what we're doing, is not going to change the situation. Staying the course and trusting in God is not going to work because we've got a major hole in the floor of the ship and the water is pouring in. It is time, I think, to change our entire approach. And to get there, I'd like to draw your attention to Jesus' parables in Luke 15. The lost sheep, lost coin, and prodigal son. Among the most popular stories of Jesus, there's no doubt that we've all heard them read dozens of times, but I'm not sure we've ever heard them read the way that Jesus really intended. So often we identify with the thing that is lost, thus taking from the story that God loves us so much that when we get lost, He'll seek us out, come after us, and bring us home. There is nothing we could ever do to separate us completely from God, which is true, don't get me wrong. I just don't think that that's what Jesus wants us to see here. Look at how the parable opens. The tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to him, but the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them, he addressed this parable. Who's the them that he's talking to? It seems to me that it's the Pharisees and scribes, the religious leaders who were supposed to be responsible for the faith of the tax collectors and sinners, but are instead caught complaining about them. Think about how this changes the interpretation of the parable if it's directed at the religious leaders rather than the sinners. When a sheep gets lost, whose fault is that really? Surely you're not going to blame the sheep, are you? They're kind of dumb. Wandering off is what they do. It was the shepherd's responsibility to keep it safe, and so it is the shepherd's responsibility to go after it. You cannot blame a coin for getting lost because, well, it's not Toy Story. Inanimate objects don't just get up and walk away. The woman must have misplaced it, and so it is up to the woman to go find it. Even with the son, potentially a stretch, I understand, but you see where I'm going here. If a boy, a teenager, a young man newly living on his own runs away, squanders his wealth, and gets into trouble, whose responsibility is that? While he no doubt has free will, yes, we also know that young people do reckless things, and you're not going to completely blame a teenager for the stupid stuff they get into, are you? At the very least, you're not going to expect them to get out of it themselves. Where's the parent? How is he raised? I say that the father goes after him not out of mercy, but out of obligation. It's his responsibility. Jesus is looking directly at the scribes and Pharisees and asking, why are these tax collectors and sinners lost in the first place? Wasn't it your responsibility to shepherd them, to teach them, to care for them, and most of all, when they went astray, to go after them? And that has to be the question we ask ourselves as well. Rather than rest on some outdated cliche and say, don't worry, they'll come back, rather than looking disinterested, without any sense of ownership in this problem, we should be asking ourselves, how did we let our kids get away in the first place? And what are we going to do to get them back? They're not going to come back unless we accept that it was us who lost them, and so it is up to us to go find them. My brothers and sisters, what we're dealing with here is not a matter of being more welcoming to those who find their way to the church, creating greater programs that are more fun. It's a desperate need for each and every one of us to take seriously our role as missionary disciples, to go out to the lost and to bring them back. If we do not devote our lives to this mission, yes, this mission, if we are not willing to step outside the walls of the church, risking rejection and humiliation, how are we any better than the Pharisees and scribes who looked on the tax collectors and sinners with disgust? These are our brothers and sisters, our sons and daughters, our responsibility before the Lord. Either we go out after them with all our effort, or they're not coming back.